Let's jump right into this explainer and look at one of history's absolute most chilling mysteries. We're heading deep into the frozen Ural Mountains of the Soviet Union to talk about the Dyatlov Pass incident. Now, if you follow historical mysteries, you know this one has kept investigators completely captivated for over 60 years. 9 seasoned hikers go up a mountain in the dead of winter, and literally none of them come down. To figure out why people are still so fiercely debating this today, we're going to break down the exact facts we have, piece by piece.
So, 10 highly experienced hikers actually started this grueling trek. But one of them got sick and had to turn back before things got really dangerous. 9 continued, and 0 survived. That one arguably unlucky decision to go home, yeah, that actually made him the sole survivor of the whole expedition. It really puts into perspective just how suddenly and completely everything went wrong out there.
Which brings us to this central question. What on earth forced them out into the freezing darkness? Why would seasoned mountaineers just urgently abandon a perfectly safe shelter? And we're not just talking about unzipping a tent, they actually cut it open from the inside out, fleeing into a violent snowstorm without their winter clothes. Whatever happened that night, it happened with such terrifying speed that they just left their absolute most essential survival gear behind.
Section 1. The Doomed Expedition.
Okay, to really grasp how bizarre this is, we gotta look at who these hikers were before tragedy struck. They were led by a 23-year-old named Igor Dyatlov, and the source material is super clear here. This group was confident, they were incredibly well prepared, and deeply familiar with extreme winter mountain conditions. They knew exactly what they were doing. This definitely wasn't some reckless weekend getaway. It was a highly serious, meticulously planned expedition. They kicked things off in January 1959, trekking deep into the northern Urals. Everything was actually going perfectly normal right up until February 1st, when they hit the slope of a remote mountain called Kholat Syakh. This is where they'd end up establishing their final camp. They even took photos recording their progress up to this point, having absolutely no idea it was going to be their last night alive. So as the weather turns nasty and visibility drops, they make a really critical decision. They decide to cut directly into the snowy slope to build their campsite. Then they secure the tent and get ready for the night. Now, I want you to mentally bookmark that very first step, cutting into the snow on the slope, because that one specific detail is going to become incredibly important later when we look at what might have caused the disaster. Section 2. A disturbing discovery. Let's fast forward a bit. The group misses their return date, panicked families raise the alarm, and a massive search operation kicks off in the bitter cold. Finally, on February 26th, rescuers find the tent. It's abandoned and half buried in the snow on the mountainside. But instead of providing any kind of closure or relief, finding this camp just made the whole thing infinitely more baffling. Rescuers walked into a scene that was just plain eerie. Like we mentioned, the tent was physically damaged, slashed open from the inside. All their essential supplies, heavy boots, warm clothing, food, cameras, were completely abandoned. Outside, there were tracks leading away from the tent, straight down the mountain toward a dark, distant forest. The evidence made one thing totally clear. They fled in absolute panic into the sub-zero night, completely leaving behind their life-saving winter protection. Section 3. The Bizarre Evidence. Let's figuratively follow those footprints down into that dark forest and see what the search party uncovered next. The first 2 hikers were discovered down near the tree line, right by a large cedar tree. Next to them were the remains of a small fire. It tells a deeply tragic, human story, right? A desperate, last-ditch effort to fight off the freezing cold and survive the night, after whatever terrifying event drove them out of their tent. As the snow slowly melted over the next few months, grim discoveries kept coming. Like we said, the first 2 were by the forest edge, trying to stay warm. Then, in the space between the forest and the abandoned tent, investigators found a few more frozen in the snow, positioned like they were desperately attempting to crawl back up to the campsite. But here's the crazy part. Months later, the last few members were found buried deep under the snow, and they had severe internal injuries suggesting they were struck by an incredibly powerful unknown force. It is just this baffling mix of survival attempts and catastrophic trauma. Which brings us to the biggest forensic puzzle of the whole case. What kind of force causes major chest and skull damage but leaves virtually 0 obvious external wounds? The medical examiners noted the trauma was incredibly powerful, yet there were no real signs of an external physical struggle. It totally defied simple logic, leaving investigators endlessly searching for an answer.
Section 4. Decades of theories. When you have a mystery this weird, with this many unexplained variables, you're obviously going to get a ton of theories. Over the last 60 years, when facts are scarce, human imagination just fills the void. Generally, these separate into two camps. On one side, wild speculation. You've got people suggesting secret military experiments, supernatural events, or totally unexplained phenomena. On the other side, natural explanations pointing to extreme weather, powerful winter winds, or animal threats. The source material notes that while the extreme stories are super popular, many of those claims are based entirely on speculation without any strong physical evidence from the scene. Section 5. The avalanche explanation.
Let's strip away the supernatural for a second and look at the most plausible modern scientific theory, one that actually grounds this tragedy in environmental physics. It involves something called a delayed slab avalanche. Basically, this is a heavy, unstable block of snow that breaks loose hours after a slope's structural integrity is compromised. Remember that mental bookmark I told you to make earlier? Researchers suggest that by cutting directly into the snow to pitch their tent, the hikers accidentally weaken the structural integrity of the snowpack right above them.
So, it sets up this deadly sequence of events. Step 1, the hikers weaken the slope. Step 2, brutal winter winds slowly pile up a massive, heavy layer of new snow directly above the tent while they sleep. Step 3, hours later, that heavy slab finally snaps and crashes down. And step 4, terrified that a second, complete collapse is about to bury them alive, the hikers slash their way out and run in sheer panic toward the trees. Honestly, this sequence logically explains the sudden escape, the slashed tent, and exactly why they bolt without their life-saving gear. But surviving that initial impact was just the beginning of the nightmare. Once they escaped the threat of the avalanche, the harsh natural elements just took over. Extreme cold, utter darkness, physical exhaustion, and plunging into deep snow without proper clothing turned an emergency evacuation into a completely unwinnable battle for survival. And those bizarre severe internal injuries? The crushing weight of that sudden snow slab could have absolutely caused those exact chest and skull injuries right before they managed to flee the tent. But we still have to stop and ask, does this one theory explain every single detail? Well, the delayed slab avalanche model is scientifically sound, and investigating these exact mechanics has actually helped revolutionize modern winter mountaineering safety. We understand snowpack dangers so much better today because of this tragedy. Yet, it still doesn't neatly prove every bizarre little detail found out there in the forest. It remains a very strong theory, but maybe not the complete, absolutely final answer.
Because at the end of the day, no one survived. The final moments of those 9 hikers might honestly never be known. So what really happened on that frozen mountain? Time, shifting snow, and brutal extreme weather have completely erased the final evidence. We're just left with a haunting historical puzzle that continues to captivate us today. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep asking questions, and I'll catch you on the next one.